Imagine your girlfriend, now a relentless and ravenous monster, resorting to an ancient ritual in a desperate bid to win you back at any price. This is Mark's tale, entwined with the chilling transformation of his once human ex-lover into a creature consumed by insatiable hunger. Welcome to Lessons in Fear, Christmas edition. Mark stares thoughtfully out the window on Christmas Eve night. His girlfriend, Joyce, had to go out of town for work. As if the universe had heard his thoughts, his phone rings, Joyce on the other end. They chat casually, Joyce mentioning that he doesn't talk or socialize with anyone other than her. Mark mentions that he actually received a letter in the mail earlier. He just forgot to read it in his busyness. I don't know how that happens, because if I get something that's not obviously junk mail, I am ripping it open. Joyce, excited, encourages Mark to go read it now. He heads downstairs to the mail drop by his door. It's a postcard from an ex-girlfriend, signed with lipstick. How did she get my new address? He thinks to himself. Mark, not wanting to alarm Joyce, and also not really wanting to discuss an ex on Christmas Eve, lies and says it's from his parents. I respect not wanting to have the discussion, but is lying really such a great idea? Joyce instructs Mark to go upstairs and look out his window. He complies and sees a light turning on and off in the house across the street, which, by the way, also happens to be Joyce's house. She had arrived home earlier, ready to surprise Mark with a romantic Christmas. She requests Mark to demonstrate his festive mood. He goes into the closet and grabs sparklers and lights them in the window. Yeah, let's just start a fire while we're at it. Nothing says Merry Christmas like burning the house down. Joyce invites him over, so Mark grabs his gift for her, an engagement ring, and heads out the door to see Joyce. While crossing the street, the winter storm grows violently. It whites out, Mark barely able to see in front of him. He crosses the street, the snow crushing beneath the weight of his feet. He eventually makes his way to her house, and the front door is already open. Mark heads inside and rubs his hands together, trying to restore warmth to his digits. He groans a little as his socks absorb the moisture from the snow getting in his shoes. Mark walks further in the house and sees a glimpse of Joyce down the hall. The living room's Christmas tree is decorated immaculately, a variety of presents stuffed underneath its watch. While admiring the tree, Joyce calls Mark.
Where are you? Did you sink into the snow? Hurry up, I'm getting tired.
Mark raises his eyebrow. I'm already inside your house and I don't see you. Joyce is confused.
What does inside your house mean? I'm standing at the door and I didn't see you come in. Hey, Santa, it looks like you broke into the wrong house. Get out of there before you get...
Joyce is cut off by electricity crackling and all of the lights burst simultaneously. The Christmas tree flickers back to life, revealing itself in a much sorrier state. The decorations scattered, the lights pulled down. Mark frantically looks around. For some reason, he had stashed sparklers from his closet in his pocket. He uses one of them to see around the dark house. He walks down the hall to see someone shaking slightly, barely illuminated by the static of the TV. He moves in to see who it is, sweat beading on his forehead. The TV shuts off and the figure disappears with it. He checks the front door. Locked, he panics to himself. There's no mechanism to unlock the door, almost as if some arcane force is holding the door against his will. Mark wanders the house and notices a picture frame of an elderly couple on the counter. This doesn't look like Joyce's parents, he mumbles under his breath. I think this is a picture of someone else. Down the hall, Mark ducks into an office. He finds a checklist on the desk. This isn't Joyce's handwriting. Someone is waiting for me here, he deduces. The checklist states adamantly that he cannot leave. Mark sets the note down and the door on the other side of the wall opens.
Honey, are you there?
The question came from the throat of something that sounded sinister. He glances around and hides under the table. An air of pressure emits from the figure. Mark's neck hair stands up on end. The figure walks by the room, the hall lights illuminating it somewhat. A woman wearing a sleek black dress, long black and red hair, fingernails that stretch to a foot in length, and very long, sharp teeth. She looks around, and Mark takes an opportunity to slip past her while she's not looking. Mark can't believe what he saw was real. He rubs his eyes as his phone rings.
Mark, stop scaring me. I know that you're here. I found the Christmas tree that you knocked over. And why did you take off its decorations? Do you even know how long it took me to decorate
She's cut
it?
off by Mark. It wasn't me, Joyce. Listen, I've been locked up here. He recants everything that's happened, including his hallucinations of the changing house and the creepy woman. Joyce, in a whisper, tells Mark that someone is in her house.
There's someone here.
In another living room, barely lit by the TV, Mark finds a plastic model of the very room that he's standing in. Some objects in the model emit a soft glow. Mark, intrigued by this, looks around and inspects these objects. After Mark touches them all, the floor of the model clicks, revealing what appears to be an old, torn page from a book. It details the devil's escapades on nights such as Christmas, where the devil looks for a job, presumable to collect souls for a master. Who resides higher than the devil? He turns the page over. The back has a circle with a star inside. Each point of the star has a smaller circle. One of the small circles has an odd symbol drawn inside. Mark pockets the page. Something hidden like this could be important. Further in the house, Mark finds a box of Christmas decorations. They look exactly like the ones Joyce had on her tree. The crazy woman had uttered something about decorating a tree. Could he calm her down with this? Mark finds the Christmas tree he saw when he first came to the house and carefully decorates it.
Mark, I think I'm
While working on this, Joyce tells Mark that she saw the woman outside her window, peering in. Mark instructs her to hide and call the police. Mark, filled with anxiety, finishes the tree and finds the woman in the hallway. She contorts her bones, bends over backwards on all fours, and pursues him. But when she gets in view of the tree, she hesitates, straightens up, and speaks calmly, almost human-like. She then gets back down on all fours and crawls through an air duct like a spider. Gathering his thoughts, Mark finds a basement to the house and begins searching for a way out. Joyce calls him again, hiding, but during the call, the monster finds her. They struggle as Mark holds his hand to his mouth, unable to do anything to help, his other hand gripping his leg in stress. A screech is heard, and Joyce, out of breath.
I launched fireworks at her.
Mark sighs in relief as Joyce mentions fireworks scared her off, as she shielded herself from the bright lights.
Try to find something.
Mark ends his phone call and notices a piano with the basic Jingle Bells tune written on sheet music. The corresponding keys have bloody red fingerprints. He lightly touches the ivory, the blood still wet and sticky. He recoils a bit, but plays the tune, wondering why the monster likely had done so earlier. The piano slams shut, a sheet of old, torn paper on the lid. It seems to be a continuation of the story from before, a widow who summons the devil to bring her ex-lover back. On the back is a familiar pentagram, but the symbol is on a different point. It looks different from the first. Could there be 5 of these? He mutters aloud. In the basement, Mark finds what appears to be a corpse hanging from the ceiling, wrapped in cloth, blood all over the floor below. A picture attached to the body, similar to the picture he saw upstairs, indicating this body belonged to that elderly man. Mark tastes stomach acid in his mouth. It closes his eyes and concentrates to not throw up. Mark finds an office with notes from a doctor detailing a patient's deteriorating vision and sensitivity to bright lights. Could this be why the monster is afraid of bright flashes? Mark remembers his ex-girlfriend also didn't like sunny weather. Mark is brave. I would have already pissed myself and probably be dead because I would have to cry and sob in a corner. A handwritten note on the table reveals an obsessive narrative. Whoever wrote the note accuses someone of being a liar, a cheater, along with various women's names and phone numbers. Down the hall in the damp basement, Mark finds a room illuminated by various candles, a pentagram drawn on the floor in blood. He recognizes 2 of the symbols from the pages he found on the floor. Where did this much blood come from? Asks Mark as his thoughts pull him back to the room where he saw the hanging corpse. Mark looks at the animal skull in the center, finding a sheet of old paper underneath. The page is the next of the devil's story. It mentions using a star and 5 symbols to summon the devil, and how a widow did such a thing to demand her husband back. Is this real? Did this person summon a devil and make a deal? He thinks to himself as he glances at the blood on the floor. The back of the page reveals a 3rd symbol. In the next room, Mark finds another corpse. This one smells more fresh, and Mark has to steel himself to even walk in the room. It has the picture of the elderly woman affixed to the cloth. Mark starts to look around when he hears footsteps coming down the concrete hallway, edging ever closer to him. He hides under a table. The woman walks into the room, looking around. Mark clenches his fists in anxiety, leaving impressions in his palm. His throat itches, begging for air as he holds his breath. The woman walks around and finds him, yanking him out from under the table, throwing him at the wall. The motion causes the ring he had grabbed from the tree earlier to fall out of his pocket. She moves in, but pauses, noticing the ring.
At last.
Mark returns to consciousness, a ringing in his ear. He looks up to see the woman staring at the ring, giggling to herself. He takes the opportunity to slip out of the room and down to the final corner of the basement that he has not explored. He doesn't find a way out, but he does find a large box stuffed with fireworks. I could probably use these to scare her off, he resolves. Mark decides to return to the main floor. On the way, Joyce calls and confirms their suspicions. The monster is afraid of bright lights. Mark takes the opportunity to tell Joyce about the ritual.
If that's the case, then
Joyce encourages Mark to go to a high window and signal for the police that she called. Mark heads for the second floor. As soon as he gets to the second-story window, he sees the brilliant blue and red lights from the police cars. Mark moves further down the house to see the police better, but before he gets there, he hears the screeching of the monster, gunshots, broken windows, screaming, and finally, nothing but the cold wind outside. His mouth drops in horror as he notices through the nearby window that all of the police are dead, one of them hanging out the window. With Joyce pushing him on, Mark decides to go look for the gun on the officer's body. It could be useful if they can distract the monster. He comes across an oddly distinct bookshelf with a note on the shelf. It details someone's narrative of losing consciousness and needing to hide the pages in case someone deceives them. It mentions an order to the books. Mark follows the instructions, causing a slot to pop out of the shelf's base, another page inside. The story continues and tells of the devil's trickery and how the widow's summoning doomed an entire town. The back contains a fourth symbol. Mark notices a telescope by a window. He carefully peeks into its viewfinder and notices it's pointing directly at his house. A note on the table beside reveals the truth. His ex-girlfriend, still stalking him after all this time. But what had she done to herself? Was she even still in there? Was there even a shred of humanity left? Joyce calls. Mark, deciding to be honest, tells Joyce the identity of the monster woman. Mark goes to the window with the cop and relinquishes his body of his gun. He takes a deep breath and tries to muster as much courage as he can. Mark heads back to the first floor. As he walks past a room, he catches a glimpse of the monster, her back to him. She's now wearing a white dress instead of the black one. He carefully treads past her, hoping not to alert her. As if the universe were doing him a favor, it would seem the monster's hearing was not significant. The upstairs living room is warm. The fireplace is running, and Mark hadn't noticed how cold the house had been with very little power. 4 stocking hooks lined at the top of the fireplace with one missing. Mark finds it in the room and hangs it up and reveals a compartment containing a familiar looking paper. The final page depicts the widow's usage of the circle a second time to break the deal and reverse everything the devil had done. A fifth and final symbol on the back of the page. Mark converses with Joyce on the phone about this. Even though it's his ex-girlfriend, he doesn't think it's her doing this. He doesn't want to kill her, even if he never wants to see her again. Joyce confers with him. Mark finds the engagement ring. With the engagement ring and his knowledge of the ritual, he devises a plan. I think I can do this, and well, if I can, I'm probably dead anyway, he says aloud. Mark returns to the Christmas tree on the main floor. He looks carefully at the pages he had collected and draws the circle on the floor, carefully drawing each symbol as correctly as possible. He takes a deep breath and places the engagement ring on a table behind the circle, praying the monster will be so enthralled with the ring it won't notice. He backs away and waits for what feels like eternity. An undeterminable amount of time passes, and suddenly she appears. She falls for the plan entirely. His ex-girlfriend walks toward the ring. The moment she steps in the center of the circle, it activates. Mark shields his eyes as she is shrouded in blinding red light. The symbols on the floor dancing to life. The monster appears to be burning from the inside out. The monster shrieks as the lights fade. Mark peers out from under his arm, his eyes adjusting back to the darkness, to see his ex-girlfriend there, looking completely human. She cries, embraces him, and apologizes over and over that she didn't mean for it to go that far. She didn't mean for any of this to happen. She didn't realize in her psychotic episode of stalking and desire that she had unleashed the devil himself. Mark saves her, but this isn't some rekindling of love. He still loves Joyce, proposes to her, and she accepts. But what will the ex-girlfriend do? Has this experience been sobering enough for her to move on finally? Surely, a deal with the devil is rock bottom. Thanks for watching this Christmas story of A Lesson in Fear.